Good morning.
Good morning.
Can everybody hear me? I really don't need a mic, really. No, back up. Okay, I guess this is it. Everybody's still asleep. And we knew this was going to happen. My name is Rich Ramsey, and what I'm going to talk about is visitations. And how I'm going to present it to you is how we worked on it. How we worked on it many years ago. And when I'm talking about many years ago, we're going to go back into like maybe the mid-'80s. This was a subject that me and people from different types of organizations back then. You have to remember back in the mid-'80s, we didn't have like ghost groups like we have today. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have a lot of things that you guys. We didn't have a lot of things that we have today, which is really good because we have a lot of new technology. If you look at, I don't know if you can see it, but this is researcher and theorist. I think for most of us are theorists. Most of us are theorists, and we try to put all these things together. Anyways, just an example of all of us coming together, and that's what the Ghost Gathering is about, where we can all come and meet and talk about things and try to understand some of the theories that are out there, especially when it comes to the paranormal. I just wanted to, thank everybody for being here and just give you a little bit of a background. I probably started around 1986. I was catching shoplifters for a department store, which was, at the time, I didn't know it was haunted. And the guy that was actually my manager was a part of a paranormal organization. He was also working on his degree. He was a psychology major. And he knew a bunch of people who were what they call underground type investigators. These were like psychiatrists, professors, and these are from universities, and there were other students that were also involved. And how I got involved in it is I had an experience at installing cameras one night in one of the department stores, and he knew that there was a haunting going on at this so-called department store. Well, it's no longer around. It's called Moss Brothers. And this store had been around for several years. And there was a lady who worked in the restaurant upstairs. It was called the Suncoast Restaurant. She had passed away, but she devoted most of her time in her life at this restaurant. And it was speculated that she was probably the one that was haunting the place. Every once in a while, we'd get reports of just pots and pans banging in the kitchen. We'd get reports of actual items that were sitting on tables that would just literally would be on the floor. Nothing stolen, but the cleaning people would always come to us and say, "Hey, can you put a camera on this just to see what's going on, because this happens daily." So we were able to put a camera on it. This was before I actually started, and he was able to catch some interesting footage, and it literally showed objects just kind of sliding off, no strings attached. Back then we couldn't manipulate like you can now with the computer system. Everything was on VHS, and once it got on VHS, it's really hard to doctor it up. But so that was kind of like my first taste of a haunting, where we actually investigated doing stuff. He asked me to come in. We set up some cameras, and we just waited and waited. And I guess one night I was upstairs. It was dark, and you picture a table with these snow globes. The ones you wind at the bottom and you shake them all up. Well, I remember standing on top of the ladder, which was right next to the escalator, and I heard the table move, and looked, and one of the snow globes started to go up, which was kind of creepy in itself. But then all of a sudden, maybe about 8 or 10 of them all went off at the same time. which caused me to get really frightened, and I jumped off the ladder, and I literally missed all the stairs going down the escalator, and I ran back to the office. And we were able to catch some interesting footage. And the type of activity that we were dealing with was kind of like poltergeist type activity where you actually had movement. And we found that we saw one of the mannequins actually turn. Now, we know that there was nobody inside the store because it's got interior security systems where if anybody moved, the motion detector would actually go off. So anyways, that was my start. They invited me to do camera setups for this organization, which I really had no idea who they were. Like I said, they were professors, and this was kind of underground. It was, the funding was very limited, and it was the connection was amongst other universities. Okay, just to give you some of the examples. Before, like today you go to an investigation, you're kind of dressed in shorts and stuff, but back then we had to dress up in suit and tie. This is when it was suit and tie today. Not suit and tie, but just a tie. That's how we dressed up back in the 80s. And just showing, I don't know if you can't see my lawn here, but this is the Winchester Mystery House. This was one of the investigations I did. I actually was there 3 times to investigate the place. And that's going way back. So just to, give people an example that it was kind of like the beginning of ghost groups. Okay, just going back in time again, the only people that we really knew back then that were investigating or doing hauntings were, we get information from police departments. There was usually some sort of author or writer, somebody writing a book. And if you remember, most of the books back, I'm not saying all of them, but most of the books back in the 70s and 80s, they all had some sort of love story to it. There was always something. They always had a reason why there was a haunting at these locations. And then, we got a lot of reports from churches. A lot of the churches and various types of religions would actually contact us to go and investigate. And basically, when somebody had a haunting, that's where they went. They went straight to usually their church, their pastor. And then the universities and doctors, sometimes people went to their doctors and said, hey, there's things moving in my house, and then they would get examined by the doctors. And that's what the universities did back then. Because there were certain people in different types of fields. I know there was some doctors that investigated with us. And what they did is before they went up and just set up cameras, we didn't just do that. I mean, we were at the bottom of the barrel when it came to investigations. What happened is they would actually analyze the person. They would go meet the neighbors. They would find out the history of the house and what the house is sitting on. And then when they really couldn't determine what was happening, and that's when they actually called us. When they actually experienced something, they would call us and we would set up cameras. And I'll tell you, it was we were probably one of the first ones to use security cameras, because I didn't know of anybody back then that had systems where we set up time-lapse video, or we set up VHS cameras to actually record a haunting. Most of the camera systems that I knew back then were, there was either from a studio or a news crew that had a big camera, and they put it on a tripod or something like that. Because remember, we didn't have portable handheld cameras back then. Parapsychology. Sorry. I'm just waking up. Association. Those were the people that I actually assisted with. I wasn't part of the organization, but that's what they called themselves back then. And they actually did most of the hauntings that I remember after they psychoanalyzed it. And back then, I don't know if you guys remember, remember the words ESP? That's some of the stuff that they studied. Telepath, clairvoyance, psychokinesis, near-death experience, channeling. Remember that word, channeling? Back then, that's what we talked about. And apparition sightings was kind of like at the bottom. And just going back into dated equipment. I don't know if you guys remember this, but this is like our equipment that we used back then. The VHS and the VHS recorder player. Our lighting, because some of these cameras were so, they were like 1 lux or 2 lux. And they weren't really low light. So some of the lighting that we used was black lighting. And we actually were able to capture some stuff on VHS using the black lighting just because it was able to highlight like maybe an image that was in white or a shadow that was in white. So we were able to capture stuff on videotape. And when I say we captured stuff, like I said, it was very hard to manipulate stuff. So if you did capture, by the time we got a call and we did a setup, it was usually a good call. And it was like maybe two or three a year, especially being down here in Florida. But the black lighting at that time worked really well for us. Tape recorder, now you guys have the digital voice recorders. These things work really well. That's all we had back then. We didn't have digital. .35 millimeter camera. You guys got digital cameras. The big difference that I noticed from back in the 80s up till now is that we didn't get very many orb pictures when we had 35 millimeter cameras. The problems that we had back then was double exposure, old film, bad film, and somebody that just didn't know how to focus. Those were the only problems that we had. So, when the invention of the digital camera exploded, I don't know if you guys have been around long enough to know that maybe about 6 or 7 years ago we had this big explosion of orb ghost, and now it's kind of curved with. I know some people in the gatherings in the past have talked about it now. It's kind of like swept and put to the side now. A lot of people understand that it's moisture and dust. The only thing I can say is if you see it physically, you take a picture of it, and you know in your heart that that's an orb. And that could be a possible spirit. But as it stands right now, I think the orb theories and stuff like that, I think we've got really good control over that, especially with the modern paranormal groups that are out there. Old DVR systems, we actually had to borrow it from the store. We kind of acquired it. We take it to our locations, and then we bring it back, of course, and then we use it at shopping. The old camera systems that we used to take them off the ceiling, and you can flip them upside down and put them on a tripod and use them for ghost hunting. We had an EMF meter. It was a very old one. It was big and clunky, but I remember that we had Geiger counters back then. I don't know if you guys use Geiger counters today. I know there's some groups that do have them, and I know the group that I have now, somebody has it in their garage somewhere. But it was a tool. It was something that we wanted to use. Maybe we could prove that we can measure some form of haunting or energy. It was worth a try. I don't think anybody uses it now. And those of you guys that have been doing this for many years, you remember that the only way we got contacted was by pager and landline telephone. And the fax machine was something that we used to send information back and forth. I mean, you guys have a good today with the computers and cell phones. We didn't have any of that stuff, so we were lucky if the pager went off. I mean, sometimes we carried it for like a couple of years, and maybe went off about 6 or 7 times. Okay, now everything that I'm going to discuss today are theories. Some of them are mine, and some of them are the theories that were discussed going back into the days of talking with professors and talking with psychiatrists and all these people that actually brought me under their wing and kind of showed me the ropes of what they were doing. A a lot of these people today are, they've gone on, they got their own business. Some are still teaching in universities, and some of them still do investigations. But everything that like I said, we're going to talk about. These are just theories. And this was one of the researches that we did, was visitation hauntings. It's kind of wide up here, and it's hard for me to see, so it's probably hard for you guys to see. So I'll just kind of read it. It says, "What is a visitation haunting?" Some say it's the recent deceased coming to visit and say their last goodbyes. I think if you go on the internet, you will see that that's pretty much the realm of how people perceive it, is somebody coming in to say their last goodbyes. It's unfinished business. When I'm talking about visitation, I'm talking about somebody who just recently passed away and has let their presence be known. And we get a lot of this, especially when we go out and do our investigations. We get people talking to us, and it sounds like a visitation more than what we call a sustained haunting. Talk more about sustained hauntings in a bit. The deceased trapped in purgatory. Basically, the thought was, when you first pass on, either just right prior or right when you do die, the thought was that there was an initial level, a first level, or a plane that they go into. They're no longer with the living, but yet they have not gone into what they call the tunnel or gone to the light. And we found out through interviewing a lot of people who experience near-death experiences, or NDEs, that some of the theories that we came up with, they actually, when we collaborated with them, it was real close as far as what we thought was happening in the case of visitation. See, they're sending a message. Some people feel, in some of the interviews that we've done, some people feel that when they have a visitation, that the deceased is trying to pass on a message. Perhaps, who killed me, or perhaps maybe there's something that they didn't get to say to a loved one or to a friend. And sometimes when these people witness, when we talk to the witnesses of visitations, they can see movement of the hands, they can see expressions, but they can't really hear them talking. And the thing about visitations, it's very hard to capture because you don't know when it's going to happen. And usually these visitations occur, some people will say, well, it came to me in a dream. We'll talk about that part of visitation as well. Okay, and they are reliving the past. There was a theory that was out that perhaps maybe that the living or the deceased is what they're going through. You guys remember this. Your life passes before your eyes, and that there was a theory about perhaps maybe they're trying to relive or remember what they were, or where they were, or a place that they visited, or a friend that they wanted to visit. And we'll touch more about that. Or they're just visiting. They just came to say hello. What's good about this is eventually, when we started the Ghost Gathering years ago, it was to have people come watch the presentations. And if there's a topic, and I don't know if John's already talked to you guys about this, but if there's a topic that you guys want to discuss and you want to bring it forward, go right ahead. Even if it's something that we've talked about before, and there's improvements in it, we always get new people. So, whenever you have an idea or you want to discuss it, this is us. This is us. Florida, everybody's here. Bring in your topic, and next year, just let us know. We'll put you as a speaker. I had to get that in there because I keep forgetting to do that. I don't know if John does that or not. Anybody can be up here, guys. Okay, what we know. This is a continuation based on interviews and witness documentations. can't see it. It's essential that visitations are okay, but it's estimated. And I remember sitting at a table when we were in Arizona, and a lot of these people from, like I said, from different universities, we all came together, and somebody said, well, what is the percentage of visitations? Because here's the thing, like I said, a lot of things, it's hard to put a number on it, especially when it comes to hauntings, because first of all, you don't know if you're actually dealing with a haunting. You really don't. You don't know, what's real and what's not real. The only way we can really determine it is if somebody did do an investigation and they just couldn't figure out why that happened. It's usually what determines a haunting. It's what they did was they took all the documentation and we sat down and we said, okay, what's really a visitation haunting? Because, what I'm going to get to is why it's important for ghost groups to understand what a visitation is. So we estimated about 8% of the hauntings that people experience or witness is possibly a visitation. Apparitions or entities resembles the deceased facial features. Another thing, just talking with witnesses and some of the people that have experienced visitations, there is in a normal sustained haunting, a lot of times people will see like a dark mass or a dark shadow or a figure of what might look like a person. But in visitation type hauntings, normally you could tell that that's my grandfather, or that's that's a family member, or that's a friend, because you can see the face, you can see more detail, and that's kind of we thought, okay, that's a good example, because every time we talked to these people, they were talking about that. They were like, yeah, I saw that person. I know who that person was. In lieu of when we go to other types of investigation where, oh yeah, it was just a dark mass. Usually that occurs in the sustained haunting. Visitations are from 1 to 3 times. Okay, this is very important because once again, we kind of put it all together, and just based on witness statements and talking with people and interviewing, usually a visitation occurs maybe once to 3 times, sometimes even more. We've had some incidences where somebody did come and visit more than 3 times, and this is where it becomes kind of important for ghost groups, because a lot of times when you do go investigate a place or somebody calls you to investigate, you might be dealing with a visitation. So we've kind of determined that when there is a visitation, it's not considered a sustained haunting. So you might go to these places, and these people are they're being honest with you. They witnessed a family member, or they witnessed a friend, but they hadn't seen him in a long time, and there's probably a good chance that you're not going to get anything. You're not going to pick anything up because it was just a visitation. There is a difference between a normal or regular haunting and visitation. Visitations are not sustained hauntings, however, they may become sustained. Okay, there's a good chance that you might have let's say this hotel might have had visitations in the past, and now, just based on, just talking to witnesses and stuff here, that they are experiencing certain types of hauntings that occur. Your grandfather or somebody who had passed away in his location or in his house, maybe he visited a couple times, or maybe he visited you at your house. But at the time it was just a visitation. Then when I remember I talked about the levels, when they pass over, they go to the light or they go to the next plane. That there's that when you go to the next plane, there's a good chance that you're going to be involved in this sustained type haunting. But anyways, that's 1 to 3 times. That's about the average that we were able to get. Okay, once again, it's still what we know or what we understand. Visitations can come from a dream. I put in red speculations and red flags because In the science world, if it came in a dream, it's usually some form of psyche. It's usually your brain. It's, you know, I've been talking with psychologists. They just feel that if it had something to do with a dream, it was probably manufactured by your brain. And you know, my wife, mom has just passed away, and she's been going through a lot of the dreams, and it seemed very real. She thinks that she was actually getting a visitation, but it's so hard to prove, because even in some of my early experiences growing up, when my grandfather came to visit me, I was in bed, but I remember being awake, and I remember actually watching him like walk into the room. I didn't really see him, but I knew it was him. And then he walked out of the room, and the next morning we got a phone call that he had passed away. Can visitation be poltergeist? Of course. Just from my own experience, and just from experiences that I've talked to other people. When I talk about poltergeist, I talk about what we talked about back then. Poltergeist type activity was movement, was noise. It wasn't, I don't know where this came from, adolescence, or a young girl, disturbed, causing furniture to move or something like that. We didn't talk about stuff like that. Basically, it was just, what it is, a noisy ghost, or movement of objects. So when I talk about poltergeist, that's what I'm basically talking about. Because even when my grandfather came to visit, he lifted up a pot off the stove in front of 6 people, and we all saw this. And it's going to go into something I'm going to talk about. It's also the trait of a visitation. This is what he did routinely. He used to go to the stove, pick up the pot, put it back down just to see what was in it. Everybody knew that. Everybody was aware of that. And then when that happened in front of us, it was like, whoa, what was that? And everybody said, oh, that's just Grandpa. We were all sitting around the table planning his funeral. So, yeah, poltergeist activity with the visitation, yeah, it could happen. Occur prior or after death. There are some theories out there that right before a person becomes deceased, that maybe they're going through different, their life is flashing before their eyes. And when I say that, the theory was that perhaps there's thought. Perhaps the deceased has thought. Maybe somebody who's unresponsive, who's in a medical bed and is about to pass away, is going through a thought process and is seeing different things that he remembered growing up, and remembered as a child, and remembered as an adult. And he's visiting these places, and let's say he's been here at this hotel, and all of a sudden we see a guy walking through the hotel, and it's the only time it's ever happened. It's not a repeat or a residual type haunting. It's the first time we've seen it. There's a good chance that maybe he was thinking about that before and after they had died. That's how we're able to sometimes know that somebody has passed away. It's because they came to see us. Not just the family. We've had, during some of our studies, we've had people, like friends, a person, their friend died in New York. They're sitting in a house in LA, in Los Angeles, and they see their friend just walk right by them, and they're like, he's never been here, but I know exactly who that was. And then they find out a couple hours later or a week later that their friend had passed away. That's a form of visitation. And it doesn't have to be family members that experience it. We found out that people have had visitations from people that they didn't even know, but they found out later that that person may have lived in that house at one time. There was a reason for them to go back to that place, that location. And like I mentioned earlier, they're not easy to capture, and they're usually witnessed by people. when we go to investigate, we bring in all our equipment, and what we're looking for is pretty much a sustained haunting. But in a visitation, you just never know when it's going to happen. And sometimes when it does happen, now that most people are aware of visitations, it's like, and you know who that person is, then you kind of wonder, it's like a premonition, oh, maybe that person passed away, and then you find out that they did pass away. Okay, what we know, visitation spirits have thought and intelligence based on NDE and witnesses. I talked a little bit about that already. I had an opportunity to observe some video and observe actual interviews with patients with near-death experience. Some of these people are doctors. Some of these people are just common people, but especially the ones that were like doctors and maybe teachers and professors that experienced near-death experiences. They sat down and what they did is they would do initial interviews with the folks, and then when you went to like specialty questions, like visitation type questions, they were finding out that these folks that had near-death experiences, they were able to think. I'll just give you some examples of some of the things that we picked up. Out-of-body experiences was the number one thing that they talked about. But sometimes they were like a half body. They said they were watching themselves getting rescued, but they saw themselves as just a half a body, maybe no hands, no legs, and some saw themselves as full body. But they knew that there was something going on because they weren't able to communicate with the people around them. And then what happened is, an example was a lady who had a half body. She said, I saw my life flash before my eyes, and I had no control over it, but I saw a friend. And then I was able to stop that image, and then next thing you know, I was at my friend's house, and I tried to communicate with her, and she kept going like this. She kept putting her hands down. And like she saw me, but she didn't want to say anything. Well, anyways, when she was brought back to life, her friend came to see her like a week later and said, is something wrong? And she goes, yeah, I died. And she goes, I knew that because I saw you. And she goes, how did you see me? I only saw half of you. And that's the same way that she saw herself when she had died. So, and she goes, yeah, you were trying. She goes, yeah, I saw you coming down my hallway, and I was like, I didn't want to deal with it, and I knew it was you, but it was just one of those things. So we were getting a lot of information like that from people who had near-death experiences, and that's how we were able to kind of tie that in with visitations as far as like intelligence and thought. We know that a lot of times visitations are comforting. People that see loved ones that come into view, or they sense that their loved one is next to them. It always seems like there's nothing really terrible about it. It's just very comforting, and people are relaxed by it. May exist on the first level, like as I talked about that earlier. That there may be several different levels that they have to go through, but it's usually the first level when you actually get a visitation. Unaware of their surroundings. We've had witnesses say that they've actually visualized the deceased, and they said that it looked like they were just like looking around in a circle. They weren't responding to them. They were just like lost, and you could just see the apparition just kind of like looking around, just like, where am I? So we've gotten a lot of those. Phone calls from the deceased. I know in some of your investigations, you've probably heard that somebody may have gotten a phone call from somebody, or you've heard the stories of people getting phone calls from what they thought is somebody that was alive at one time. So we kind of threw that in with visitations because it doesn't happen all the time. I know at the Clewiston Inn, we had one of the ladies that had passed away there was a speculation that she kept calling at 10 o'clock every night. It was coming from her room, and this was for years. All at the same time, the phone was disconnected, and it was a new system put in there, but they were still getting phone calls from who nobody knows. Visitation traits. We talked about that a little bit. And I'm going to give you an example of a visitation trait. It's when you know somebody that has passed on, or even if you didn't know that they passed on, there's certain things that they do that you recognize, and what happens is those, like the sound of keys. I'm gonna tell you a story of one of the traits and how we were able to determine who that was. I kind of put this in here just so everybody has a little bit of an understanding of sustained hauntings. One of the reasons why we brought visitation up is because you don't hear about it. You don't hear about it on TV. What are the hauntings that you hear about? Residual hauntings. You hear about intelligent hauntings. There's more hauntings than that up there, but you don't hear, you hear about poltergeist activity, and I put demonics up there. Doing this for a long time, I think I've only came across 2 demonic cases. I think they're very, very rare, and they turned out not to be demonic at all. Orbs, shadows, apparitions, manifestations. Those are pretty much, I guess, what we would call sustained hauntings. Those are what we look for as investigators. But you never really hear somebody on TV, because a lot of what I've seen within the last 10 years is based on how we've seen investigations done on TV. But you never hear the stuff about visitations. And you never hear about coincidental haunting, which is probably going to be next year's topic. But coincidental haunting is basically, let's say somebody does have a visitation. I'll give you an example of a hotel. Del Coronado Hotel in San Diego. They had visitations many years ago of a female. It's the same story all the time. It's about a female who was waiting for her lover. You can see, once again, it's an old story, so it had a love story. She ended up committing suicide because her lover never showed up. And people witnessed her, maybe about 2 or 3 sightings. But if you talk to the people there, the staff there today, they've not seen her in quite some time. And a lot of the groups out there have said, okay, it's got to be what we call a visitation. So she hasn't shown up in a long time, but there are things that still occur there that people now know that the place was haunted or had a visitation. There's things that happen when we talk about coincidental haunting. It's like, let's say you put your keys on the table, a little kid comes in and moves the keys, puts it over to the other side, and then you get in there and like, oh, my keys were right here, now they're over here. It must be the haunting, because you're aware that place is haunted. And so basically, that's coincidental haunting. And we get a lot of that. A lot of times people at their homes, we get residents that call us up and I'm going over.
No, you got 10 minutes.
Still going over. Anyways, those are some of the things that you don't even hear about. And coincidental haunting is very important, because as an investigator, when you go, you have to determine whether or not it's actual, the sustained haunting. You have to figure out whether or not it was a visitation. And a lot of, once somebody knows that the place is haunted, because obviously family members and neighbors, they talk about their hauntings in their house, and then all of a sudden something happens, but it's not really a haunting, but they consider it as a haunting now because they don't remember moving their keys. Okay, here's an example of a visitation trait. In 1976, my Uncle Joe Campbell was driving his car, and we were all at the beach, and a four-engine prop plane, Manila Airlines, headed to the Philippines, took off from the Gani airport, got off the ground, one of the engines stalled, plane went down and crashed and landed on top of my uncle. We pulled up on the scene. Back then, there was police departments and there was fire departments, but it was on our way, and we was able to see the carnage and the plane crashed. And I saw what looked like a pickup truck, but my uncle drove it around. But when a plane lands on it, you never know what it is. So we didn't even know it was him. Later that evening, we found out that he had passed away. We had just gone through a typhoon, Typhoon Pamela, and nobody had power on the island. My dad had a generator. He was like one of the few people that had a generator on the island. And when we found out that he had passed away and that he was part of that airplane crash, we obviously my dad pulled the generator and took it over to where they were going to have the funeral, which funerals occurred at the homes. Obviously it was a closed casket, but the nights leading up to it was kind of weird. It was kind of strange. My Uncle Joe loved to drink beer. He always had a big set of keys strapped to him. He was an electrician. And so those were some of the traits. He always came over to the house and played pool because we were like one of the few people that had pool tables. I'm sure there was more, but everybody always came over to our house and played pool, especially my Uncle Joe. My Uncle Joe frequented the neighborhood, which was all family members. Okay, so one day, this is probably the next day after he had passed away, my cousin, who lived next door, my brother and myself, we were playing pool until it got dark. And we just had candlelight from there. Everybody was gone. Everybody was helping at the funeral, which was way down the road. And we just started talking about the crash. And I just remember sitting there. We were all laying on carpeting in my dad's game room. We were laying in the back, on the back side of the pool table, so nobody really could see us. And nobody was there. It was just us three. And it was probably maybe about 9 o'clock at night when my brother decided he was going to pull his hair out, put it in the candle, and burn it. And it just instantly reminded us of the flesh that we smelled the day before. And then it was like, and then we started talking about my Uncle Joe, and we stopped. Next thing you know, we hear the back door open. It's a screen door, so you can hear it. It squeaks, and it closed. We just said, who the hell was that? We didn't hear a car pull up because the car would have pulled up in front of the game room. That's where our apartment was. We hear the refrigerator door open. We hear it close. We hear the opening of a can of beer. And remember, back then, it was the bottle cap came off, the whole thing, so you just ripped it out, and we heard that. We're like, okay, somebody's here. We heard footsteps walking up towards the pool room, and right when it got to the doorway, we're standing. We can't see because we're under candlelight, and we're like, did you hear keys? Did you drink beer? We're all kind of thinking the same thing. It sounds like Uncle Joe's here, but wait a minute, he's dead. We heard what sounded like a pool ball. We're still laying behind the pool table, laying on the floor, and we heard what sounded like the pool balls. But we're looking, the slot's back there, and all the pool balls are there, including the cue ball. And because we're holding up a candle, and we look up, there's nobody there. And so there was a door right behind us. We get out of the door. We run over to my aunt's house. It must have been, I don't know, it was 1976. So I ran over to my aunt's house with my cousin. We run in there, and she's like, shh. We go, why? And we're all breathing heavily. She goes, because Uncle Joe is here. How do you know? Because I heard his keys, and he opened up the beer and went to the refrigerator. That is a visitation trait. Those are the same things that my Uncle Joe has done for many years. And we really thought he was there. In '78, I lost my grandfather. And I told you about, I thought he came in, he sat down, sat on my bed, and I could feel the bed go down. I could feel that he's there. But it doesn't register to me that he's dead because he wasn't dead when I went to bed. And I saw him get up. And just like an image, but it's not really clear, and then he walked out. 6 o'clock in the morning comes along, the phone rings, and I could hear my mom start to cry. She just found out that my grandfather just passed away. How do you explain that? It was obviously a visitation. And based on the time, it was early in the morning. And, the only thing I can say is he came and visited me. So those are some of the things that you're going to hear from people when you go out and do your investigations. You're going to hear those kind of stories. And sometimes, as an investigator, you have to determine, okay, is it going to be a waste of our time? Because it sounds like a visitation. You want to find out if these hauntings still persist. You want to find out if things are still being moved. You want to find out different kinds of traits that, find out if that's somebody that they know. This is if you really want to embarrass the hell out of your dog. Okay, why is it important? Once again, you want to know what you're dealing with. You want to know if you're dealing with a visitation or a sustained haunting. Like I said, if 80% is visitation hauntings, there's I think there was a low number of actual real hauntings or sustained hauntings were like 15%. And then you take that 15% and 80% of it may be visitation. The numbers are going to be really low, so good luck in your investigations. But you want to save time, you want to save money, try to find out what it is. Because if it's a visitation, it's really, you're not going to call that person back. I mean, they came because they may have visualized that location, that area, they may have wanted to see you, but they may never come back. Okay. Anybody that experiences visitations, I always like to hear about it. If you guys have any stories or anything that you want to talk about related to visitation, the floor up here. And this is a continual study. This has been going on for me since 1986. And just, putting my stories together. And I want to hear, maybe something that you guys may have come across, or maybe there's something that we can piece together here. We'll open the floor for probably about 5 minutes. Do I have anything else on that? Okay, here. I investigated the Queen Anne Hotel in San Francisco. It had the same kind of thing as the Del Cortez Hotel, or Del Coronado Hotel in San Diego. There was a lady, actually the lady in the Queen Anne Hotel, she didn't die there. She was just a helper, but for some reason, the legend or the story goes that she has come and visited, and now a lot of things that occur there. There really hasn't been anything recent. I mean, there's been some groups investigating it still, but they haven't really been coming up with anything. We kind of early on determined that may have just been a visitation. But see, the thing about visitation, if let's say there was a visitation here at this hotel or a visitation at your house, doesn't necessarily mean that your house is haunted. It was just a visitation. And those, same thing with the Del Coronado. A lot of the activity has kind of slowed down or disappeared. As time goes on, they don't really talk about their hauntings there anymore, and so people aren't experiencing it, so there's no coincidental hauntings. And I put the end for now because this is an ongoing study, and I'd like to hear from anybody who has any questions.
I've got a quick question. When you talked about NDEs, you said people would see maybe half the body, maybe missing arms, and I was just wondering if there was any significance to that.
I was able to sit in one of the interviews, and I remember I asked, I kind of wondered about that too. It's just when I guess I'm going to go into something here after I say this, but It's just, I guess when you pass on and you finally realize that you had passed on. Sometimes the people, in confusion are looking around and they can see. Some have said they've seen other dead people and they've only seen half bodies, and some have said that they've looked at their own body and they've only seen half. I don't know why. Maybe that's just the amount of energy that's available at that time when they crossed over. That's the only thing I can say about them. It's probably the amount of energy, and a lot of it is based on, for a lot of people it would be religion as to maybe it was God and just said, okay, make them half body or something. I don't know, but I think maybe about 3 or 4 people that had near-death experiences talked about what they saw. Some of them didn't even see their hand, but they could see their arm, but they just couldn't see their hand. And then when they were visiting, it was the same as the witness statements. Were like, yeah, I didn't see any arms. I just saw I didn't see the hand, I just saw the arm. Yes?
What do you know about doppelgangers?
What's that?
What do you know about doppelgangers? Doppelgangers? Doppelganger?
Doppelganger? Not much. Not much. Anything else?
Hi. Do you have any, as far as visitations go, do you have any documentation or any type of tests or anything you guys may have done during that time? As far as somebody who's committed suicide, what is the significance of, or numbers, some people who've experienced suicide in their family, and have they been visited by people who committed suicides?
Okay. Yes, we've documented, when we do our prelims and stuff like that, we try to document everything as much as possible. But I remember, like suicides, do they come back? I've heard some people come back, and I've heard some people not come back. My mentor, for instance, he didn't commit suicide, but he was the guy that got me started in this. And I really thought that, because he was so gung-ho with the paranormal, and he was so gung-ho about ghosts and stuff, I really thought that he was going to come back and say, hello, hey, Rich, it's all okay. I didn't even dream about it. I've never seen it. And I thought that, him being very important to me, that he would have came. There's other things like my mother-in-law just recently passed away, but didn't get anything. I even investigated her house here recently. And this was like maybe 2 months ago. And just some people come to visit. I guess when they get to that plane, the first plane, they continue on to, I guess, the tunnel or the light, and they don't go on. Yeah, they don't linger. And I don't know, with suicides, I've heard people coming back from suicides, and I've also heard people come back in dreams. But like I said, dreams are kind of iffy. There's always a red flag with that, because even my wife has dreams of her mom. And it looks so real, and she really thinks that her mom is there. But, from the science point of view, or from, because it was a dream, so they kind of toss it out. But there have been people who have had visitations through dreams, and they've received messages from their loved ones or from somebody that they didn't know about, and then they found out that it was true. So, maybe it is true that it could happen within the dream.
Thank you.
Sometimes I hear when someone has passed away that they give a sign to let them know they're going on. I had that happen to me when my mother, I asked her to visit me when she had just died, and she touched my arm. My whole arm was tingling, and my dad felt the pillow being moved on his bed right beside him, like it was being tucked in. And my daughter saw my mom in the corner with her hands in prayer. Does that happen a lot?
That happens a lot, and that that's a classic form of visitation. Your daughter seeing, was it your mom?
Yeah.
Okay, your daughter seeing your mom. That's classic as far as visual. She did recognize it as your mom. The tucking, that's a form of, it's poltergeist type activity, but it's still part of the visitation because that's a trait, a visitation trait that we just talked about. That something that your father recognized and knew that was your mom, and you asking your mom to you felt her presence being there. A lot of people, yes, we do get that kind of people coming to us and talking to us about that, and that there's a lot of classics there as what visitations are. Does it mean that your place is haunted? Probably not.
No.
But the visitation is a form of haunting. It's just it's not a sustained haunting like a lot of the things that we look for is ghost investigators.
My mom, she passed last November, and we had the hospice nurse was there. He just got done checking her. He said she was fine. My wife went into the room with one of the ladies from our church and was talking to her. And all of a sudden, my wife just noticed her in blue stuff. My mother-in-law was out front. She just went out to smoke a cigarette, and she said, right outside the window, there's a bush that has big, long, skinny leaves on it. She said it looked like a whirlwind was in that bush, like a dirt devil type thing.
Right.
But it never left that one. And she said, I didn't even finish smoking my cigarette. She said, I knew something was up. And she came in and she says, is everything all right? We told her that. But she said that bush was just whirling around like crazy. And when my mom was over in Tampa yet, it was really weird because we were watching TV, and I had one of those crystals with the laser images in it. We have a angel. This thing was up on top of the TV for probably a year and a half, and all of a sudden it flew off at like a 45-degree angle, landed right in front of her chair.
Okay.
And I tried pushing the thing off, and it would just go straight down and bounce. There's no way, unless that thing was pushed, it could fly down. And me and my brother both see it.
Something like that. I mean, you've not experienced anything else like that happening within your home. It sounds like a good example of a visitation. The deceased, you got to put yourself in that situation. When you're dead, you're obviously you got to be in some form of shock. You're trying to get your bearings, and you're trying to communicate with whomever. I mean, I think if I was to die, I would try to let people know immediately everything is fine, I'm okay. I've made it, and I would try my best, to communicate with you somehow or another. And that's a part of it, and that's a part of that type of haunting. And yeah, it sounds the thing flying off the TV. I mean, that would obviously freak me out, especially that you've never had any other type of activity in your house. So it's somebody trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
And they did. And like I said, in visitation, you will have poltergeist type activity, which is movement. What I consider movement of objects and maybe noise. Like furniture moving around. We've had that too. Okay, any more questions? Okay, just now, I just want to reiterate, I think when this is 5 years that we've been doing this, and, it was an opportunity. I thought about this many years ago when I wanted to get all the people that I used to investigate together, and obviously that was never going to happen. And then when I found a hotel that we could do an investigation and may want to hold a function like this, one of the guys that you will see later on today, Morgan Bell, was able to obtain the hotel, and that's how this gathering stuff happened. And we wanted to make sure that nobody was going to profit from it, and that it was everybody from Florida and beyond, Georgia, Alabama, whoever wanted to come and speak on a topic based on the paranormal. And here we are today, and I thank you all for coming.